Hello, and now we're going to finish off the second half of our lecture on COVID-19, the timeline of, writing a history of COVID-19 in the US in its the first year of 2020 via the use of digital ephemera. It's shorter, this particular lecture, and that also says something. By the time we get into July, there's a bit, I think, fatigue in other words, a lot of primary sources, including digital primary sources from the March. But by July, we see it kind of tapering off. Okay, it's only been a few months, but the activity decreases. So what I'll do is, let's go to the second half. Okay. So for the second half, right, here we're going now, end of June, entering July. It's the summer and the pandemic here. Look at the following tweet. And speaking of somebody who used to do group projects all by myself, I could sympathize. Again, this refers to legitimation. How so? Leandra is referring to those who did find the various state orders to stay at home legitimate, okay? And more or less feels like following the rules is becoming like the one who does the group project all by him or herself. Okay. Then we have an interesting phenomena as of July. When various countries stop Americans from traveling there, because by this point, America would have the highest rate of infections. Okay. So that Mexico closing the border and Arizona. The very few countries that allowed the US to travel, I guess, so this would have been let me fix this. This would have been when the Mexican border was open. And then we have a Canadian political cartoon, again referring to how Canada has closed its borders at particular junctures. Because remember, previous image, yeah, Canada was closed to US citizens. Most of Europe would now allow American tourists to go in. And based on giving geography exams, I'm not surprised that somebody would have thought Europe was a country. And then what does July 7th represent? Having gone through the full policy cycle, the Trump administration decides the various state lockdown orders are to be terminated, okay? And of course, the symbol of the termination was that the economy would be reopened, but that would also then require an announcement that schools would be open so that parents could send their kids to school so they could go back to work. Now, do you see again how just Brian Class doesn't matter if Trump reads this or not. What is interesting is what we said about the digitalist revolution. It's participatory, it's grassroots, anyone can partake in it. So that I want you to think when in history, when a US president was able to make a point, somebody could talk back to that point, just anyone, not a news reporter, not the elites, anyone could talk back and get their message being read by a mass audience. You don't even have to be in the US in this case to respond to this message. Okay, now for the opening of schools, let's see what does this modified digital image, of course, it's not an actual book. That is, again, representing legitimation. Schools are going to be open. The Secretary of Education is Betsy DeVos. And this person who created this image finds that opening up the schools is illegitimate. Okay. So there you go. It's the same with this one. Okay, so Trump makes a policy. Every single one of these digital images are basically saying that we don't find the opening of school a legitimate action. It's all legitimation. The same with this political cartoon. And the same here. The tweet, the meme in this case is not Dwight Schrute. The meme is opening up the schools. And then other issues about opening up the school. It requires kids to behave in ways that no child has ever behaved in the history of children. And again, Homer saying, "You're sending me back to school at the height of the pandemic." And Homer says, "The height of the pandemic so far." Okay, that was a crappy imitation, but you gotta try. Again, all representing a challenge to the legitimacy of the decision of Trump. And then other issues. How will social distancing work when they run shooter drills in classrooms this fall? And again, this is just something that is basically a single person is trying to raise awareness of. Again, images like this, the plan to reopen the economy, it's all goes into the realm of legitimation. The same with the following, and you could understand this imaging because everyone around the world recognizes the Disney castle, as well as by this time, the shape of the coronavirus. Here we are for July 10th, okay? Where now, what does July 10th represent, or the middle of the summer of 2020, where the pandemic now, an image like this reminds us that the pandemic was really hitting the US hard at this time. Whereas the various countries here were, for the most part, reopening. They were opening up, okay? And again, I did the whole lecture on what the mask symbolized. The meme was the mask and how it divided the nation. So here I got this image on July 19th. The rest of the world knowing they banned Americans from traveling to their country. I included in this particular lecture because it deals with the travel bans imposed on the Americans. Okay. Again, a continuous reference throughout the summer of the fact that the United States had been now the target of travel bans. Here we are, July 30th. Again, the kind of comparison between the US and various other states. It's all what is this historical period when the numbers really started to skyrocket in July of 2020 in the US. Then we just jump to the next major event in the historical record because, like I said, a history of COVID-19 in the US is not a history of every single month or every single day. It's the major junctures. Donald Trump the news is announced on October 7th that Donald Trump is affected with COVID-19. And of course, here we have a tweet from Bernie Sanders, digital ephemera. In other words, if I don't have the date here, how do we know which historical period this tweet was emerging in? It's, of course, Walter Reed. That's where Trump was treated. So remember, like I said, there's a hidden language going on throughout this lecture. We could all nevertheless know what this is referring to based on the context that we've looked through. Now, remember what I said about hyperreality? That of not, in the digital era, being able to, it's the difficulty of distinguish between reality and not virtual reality, but hyperreality. You would see, you would think this would, you would actually think this is a real tweet the minute you started reading it. but then starting to realize, no, this is sarcastic, this is political humor. But the point is, you have to look it over a bit before you get that, because because of the age of Photoshop and the digital edit, anyone could create a Trump tweet. This is a stock image that's used for so many different purposes. But now you know that's not the meme. The meme is Trump being affected with COVID. That's what unites everything that I've showed you so far. Again, with the following, that's all a reference to the meme of Trump and COVID-19 being infected. Still the meme of Trump being affected. This is the support from somebody from the same political spectrum in Italy. And then, where are we now? We're in March 14th, 2020. The election has occurred. Okay. And in this case, the meme is Trump himself. And of course, remember, the outcome of the election was still being determined. And now we can turn it to the other side. Now that, let's just finish off this history. Oh, let me pause. And it's okay if somebody called me and I didn't turn off my phone, because it's my birthday and I'm spending it with you guys. So this is my wild birthday. But anyway, where were we? Okay, so we're finishing off the virus. Okay, now what are we going to see is, of course, a second phase in the history of the COVID-19, because you're going to have a change in leadership. This is, of course, now from the other side, because really what I've been showing you throughout the most part is the relationship between digital media and basically, so with this study, what did we do? Notice how many times I put the word legitimation? So now what can we conclude after this historical study I've done? What is the use of digital? What is the function of digital media during this pandemic? It's a way to challenge the legitimacy of the government in power. It's a tool of political resistance. Okay? Now that Trump is out of office, Biden is in office, it's of course gonna evolve in the other direction, right? And so basically, what am I saying here? What I showed you previously was more or less a social media bubble. And of course, this is an alternative social media bubble. And that's it. That's also another, go back to Marshall McLuhan, the medium of the message. What would we say? What's the medium of social media? What is the message, sorry, of social media? Social media are like iron cages. They create bubbles where nobody breaks out to go and see what's on the outside. Again, others just referring to now we're in the vaccine phase. Okay. Yes, Pfizer announced its first major company to announce the development of the virus, of the vaccine. And then we're going to get images like this. What is the meme here? The possibility we can no longer work at home. Okay. And now what's the next challenge? Implementation. Implementation is getting the vaccine out. Okay. And fortunately for the US, they're primarily using Pfizer and Moderna. AstraZeneca has a lot of problem. And of course, Russia has their own Sputnik vaccine. But there we go. That's the end of our history of COVID-19. Thank you. The end of history of COVID-19 in the US.